If you enjoy listening and watching the Free Wednesday show, now live stream, welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kaye. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into the Garnet and Black Town Hall. It is May the 1st. Can you believe it's May already? Oh, my goodness. It is the year of our Lord, 2024, on a May the 1st. I am Keith Alsep, and we have a great show lined up for you today. In just a few minutes, we will be joined by my good friend John Whittle from thebigspur.com to talk about Lamont Paris staying hot on the transfer portal and the recruiting trail, picking up over the weekend South Carolina native and Alabama starting Final Four center Nick Pringle. Of course, the news was not all good. We thought Pringle would take other visits. They thought LaSalle transfer point guard Jameer Brickus would probably commit. He was scheduled to commit and then took a last-second trip to Villanova and decided to stay at home in Philly and play for Villanova. So we'll get the latest on where John thinks Lamont Paris and staff could go to find that all-critical, experienced point guard, because it's going to be tough to replace Talon Cooper. And honestly, there's nobody, in my opinion, on the roster capable of doing it. So we'll see what happens. I do like Morris Ugasuk. How big of a jump can he take? We'll get into all of that and get John's take on the additions of Cam Scott, Jordan Butler, and Nick Pringle coming up. Then we'll be joined by Jordan Kaye from the State and Go Gamecocks. He is the football beat writer. We'll get his thoughts on South Carolina after the spring game, his impressions, and as we get ready to dive into our Nana's Porch news notes and headlines, we'll talk about a 2 for Tuesday with the Gamecocks picking up 2 transfer portal wide receiver commitments. All right, your Nana's Porch chat box. Leave your comments there, your questions. We'll get to them. Today's show is brought to you by Nana's Porch, the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. They should be your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash on the weekend with the whole hog barbecue. Nana's Porch has got you covered. If you have an event that requires a food trailer, Nana's Porch voted among the top 3 food trailers in Charlotte by the local newspaper poll. And as we all know, the award-winning pimento cheese voted both number 1 and number 2 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association, with smoky jalapeno taking number 1. That's my personal favorite. And the great regular flavor coming in at number 2. Go to nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. Tell him I sent you. You'll love it. I guarantee it. Support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. All right. Yesterday, it was a 2 for Tuesday for Shane Beamer, Gamecock Football, and new wide receiver coach Mike Furry. As in the afternoon, he picks up Florida State redshirt freshman wide receiver Vandrevius Jacobs, 6 foot 175, out of Fort Pierce, Palm Beach area. He played in 4 regular season games plus the bowl game, so he will be a redshirt freshman. He's 6 foot 175. His senior film is electric. He had 3 receptions for 60 yards for Florida State. As we all know, they had Keon Coleman and a bunch of older guys. But he was teammates last season with Gilbert Edmond, and they both played at the same high school program, Westwood High School, there in Fort Pierce. He was the Palm Beach Player of the Year by ESPN. His junior and senior year, he had 149 receptions, 2,320 yards, and 31 touchdowns. As a senior, 100 receptions, 1,511 yards, and 21 touchdowns. He's a natural playmaker. He's fast. He's shifty. Kind of reminds me of those old school wide receivers Bobby Bowden had, or you could go back to the Alabama guys like Devontae Smith. Not the biggest guy, but fast, a playmaker, great hands, run after the catch. He's in the fold. He'll be coming this summer. And then last night, the Gamecocks finally get the big wide receiver they need in Dlaevon Campbell, 6'4", 218. He will only have 1 year of eligibility. He started his college career at Illinois when Lovie Smith was the head coach, transferred to Nevada, and over the course of the last 2 seasons at Nevada, he became a big-time playmaker out west. 69 catches, 1,053 yards, and 3 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. Excuse me. This past season, he led the team with 31 catches for 594 yards and 2 touchdowns after 38 catches, which was second in 2022 and 459 yards. He is a big play threat and a big guy at 6'4", 218 pounds. 5 catches of at least 40 yards, 9 catches of at least 30 yards, and averaged 19.2 yards per catch in all games last season, which led the Mountain West Conference. Okay, he's out of Missouri City, Texas, which is in the Houston area. He's played big-time high school football, and he satisfies a major need for Mike Furry and for South Carolina. So the Gamecocks now have 5 transfer portal wide receivers and 2 freshman wide receivers, and you get a young, high upside guy in Jacobs, and you get the big, tall jump ball target in Campbell, who's a veteran and has played a lot of football and will be in his man's body. I think both of these guys get in the rotation. All right. Dawn Staley and the National Championship Women's Program, they will open their season in Las Vegas in early November against a yet-to-be-named opponent. I'm kind of hoping it's Southern Cal, but Dawn Staley announced that this morning on 107.5 The Game during an interview with her, where she also bemoaned the fact that a lot of teams just don't want to play them. And she doesn't know why, because she tries to schedule the toughest non-con schedule in the country. Gamecocks already set to play NC State in Charlotte as part of a big doubleheader on November the 10th. UConn will come back to Colonial Life Arena this year, where Paige Beckers will have the opportunity to be the first UConn player in school history to lose to South Carolina 5 times. And then the Gamecocks will travel to California, where they are scheduled to play UCLA, and were scheduled to also play Stanford on that trip. And we all know the schedule won't stop there, and they'll get a big team in Las Vegas. Last year, they had a doubleheader as part of the Hall of Fame Classic, and my favorite social media meme was created when I took a snapshot of Kim Mulkey's face when Colorado was just pouring it on LSU in that big upset. LSU opened the season as the national champs and went down, and they trailed by as many as 17 points in that. Gamecock baseball took 2 of 3 over the weekend from number 4 ranked Kentucky. Tonight, they will host East Tennessee State at 6:30 p.m. to conclude a 7-game homestand. Gamecocks are now 29-14, 11-10 in the SEC with 3 series to go. They'll be at Missouri this weekend. Next weekend, they'll play Georgia before closing it out on Rocky Top against Tennessee to end the season. The Gamecocks have been getting great Friday night starting pitching. We'll get into those games, break them down, but South Carolina won 6-5 in dramatic fashion on Friday night. The game was tied at 1-1 going into the 9th inning. And Kentucky got 3 in the top of the 9th. And then the Gamecocks hit 3 solo home runs, one by Blake Jackson, one by Dalton Reeves, and then one by Gavin Cassis. To tie it, they go to the 10th. Kentucky gets another run, and then Blake Jackson comes up in the bottom of the 10th and hits a 2-run walk-off bomb to give the Gamecocks a 6-5 win. Saturday, they lost a 15-13 slugfest. I guess Kentucky got the 2-point conversion, and Carolina only scored a touchdown and 2 field goals. But then Sunday, the Gamecocks opened a 40-gallon drum of whoop-ass and poured it all over the Wildcats, run-ruling them 10-0 in 7 innings. We'll get into that with John Whittle coming up in just a few minutes. And like I said, Lamont Paris gets the centerpiece of his transfer portal class in Nick Pringle. They did not, however, get the point guard they had zeroed in on, which was Jameer Brickus. We'll also get into that coming up in just a few minutes with John Whittle. So a little NFL draft review. Xavier Legette, as we all know, on Thursday night went in the first round to the Carolina Panthers. But then it was not until the 5th round when Spencer Rattler was drafted. We'll get into that with Jordan Kaye. That, after 6 quarterbacks go in the first round, none in the 2nd, none in the 3rd. I don't know if somebody got picked ahead of him in the 4th, but he went in the 5th round at pick number 150 to the Saints. And some teams made up their mind and based on that Netflix thing when he was 17 years old. Come on, man. That's why the NFL, they make too big of a deal out of playing in shorts, and they have too much time and overanalyze instead of just picking guys based on the film and what they know. That's just my take. Marcellus Dial went in the 6th round, the New England Patriots and their new regime. And then Nick Gargiulo going to John Whittle and Teddy Hefner's team, the New York Jets, Jets in the 7th round. He's from New York, so he's going home. Congratulations to him. And we have John Whittle joining us right now. And so let's go out on the Nana's Porch guest line and bring in the dean of Gamecock baseball and men's basketball coverage, my good friend, John Whittle. There he is, John. It's great to see you. It looks like it's a bright, sunshiny day in the capital city.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day out here today. Perfect day to play East Tennessee State, I guess. So very, very nice afternoon here in Columbia.
Great. Well, hey, I can't thank you enough for being with us. We definitely want to get into Gamecock baseball with you. A huge series win over Kentucky. But let's start, if you don't mind, with Lamont Paris and men's basketball. They stay hot in the transfer portal, getting what I describe, and I think you have described as the centerpiece or the crown jewel of their transfer portal class in Nick Pringle over the weekend. And this kind of went down different than what we thought coming into the visit, but I guess there's just no place like home, John.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to the staff for being able to pull that off, because from the time that he went into the portal up until the start of his visit, you know, the thought was that he wanted to take a few visits and go through the recruiting process and, you know, see what was out there. But South Carolina pushed to get him on campus first, be the first visit, and, you know, roll out the red carpet and you know, with the hope that maybe he would commit. And, you know, they did such a good job and were so impressive for Pringle and his family that, you know, he decided to go ahead and pull the trigger, which was not shocking, but pretty surprising that he did it, that he did it then while on the visit. Didn't even wait until the visit was over. Did it mid-visit. So kudos to the staff for getting that done.
I mean, that's a really big effing deal, if you ask me, to get him to commit while on campus. But how big of a deal was it that Lamont Paris and the entire staff go to Tuscaloosa and meet with him either, you know, on campus or off campus, but somewhere in Tuscaloosa to get the ball really rolling? I mean, I'm sure there was phone contact or maybe even Zoom calls or FaceTimes, but having the whole staff up there just showing how important he was to the program. What kind of impression have you been able, you know, to gather from your sources on how big that was?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question that I didn't think about asking that specifically, you know, after his commitment went down. But, you know, what I do know is usually when this staff prioritizes somebody, not always, but usually when this staff prioritizes somebody like they have, they usually get that guy. And, you know, there's so many things in recruiting now that influence kids in terms of NIL and, you know, taking care of certain things. But there's still a piece of recruiting too that impresses kids that when they really feel wanted. and when they know that they are the priority, and that's what South Carolina made Nick Pringle. So, I do think that is a big deal, and it was a big deal for BJ Mack. It's certainly something that can't be overlooked.
No doubt. I mean, obviously last year, Lamont Paris didn't even go with the team to the SEC tournament. He went straight to Charlotte to meet with BJ Mack and his family. I think that had a huge impression. Pringle, Mack, not the same type of player. Last year, South Carolina, a great season, the biggest improvement of any team in the country, going from 11 wins to 26 wins. But the teams that really gave them the problems were the teams that had the big, the really athletic bigs. It just wasn't a good matchup. Pringle is a very athletic big, a shot blocker, a rim protector. He's not going to be a three-point shooter, but I think, as we all know, that's kind of the role they envision for the notorious CMB to be more of a stretch for at times this coming season. I mean, I just think it's a really big deal to add a guy. And for me, I really like the fact he had his career game against Clemson as being a native of South Carolina and sending them home in the Elite Eight with a double-double.
Fair, very fair. And you're right. Like folks talk about a BJ Mack replacement, and I'm guilty of it too. Like who replaces BJ Mack? And probably the best answer is Colin Murray Boyles, and he's going to be out there doing what Mack did last year. And folks will say, well, he doesn't shoot the three like Mack. Well, they think, meaning the coaching staff, and he thinks, meaning Colin, that he can shoot that, and that that's going to be something that takes his game to the next level this year. And it's not something that he did much of last year, and they basically told him to quit doing it about halfway through SEC play. That next year is going to be your time. This year you need to play this role that we have you in, and so he did. So Colin's kind of the BJ Mack replacement, and Nick Pringle is kind of the Colin Murray Boyles replacement. And if you think about it, you've upgraded those two spots because there's a lot that Colin can do well, and if he can knock down that three ball, like he's going to be better than BJ Mack. BJ Mack was great for the Gamecocks last season, but Colin Murray Boyles can be better in that role. And Colin did a great job at that 5 last year for what he is. But Nick Pringle can do better in that role this coming year. So, and then you throw Jordan Butler in there too, and he can stretch the floor and knock down the 3-point shot, and he's probably going to have to get used to banging around a little bit and be a little bit more physical and put on a little bit of weight and strength down low. But he's 7'1" with long arms and has the ability to block shots and time things up. So, yeah, I mean, I think things look up for the Gamecocks on the interior.
I mean, no doubt about it. And we saw them even be able to go to the small lineup last year by playing Zach Davis and Miles Studi with one post player. And so that's an option. But with Butler, Colin Murray Boyles, and Nick Pringle, to me, that's what an NCAA tournament team that's capable of winning some games in the tournament should look like. Certainly I think Murray Boyles, his ceiling is so high. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but before he got the mono, he was shooting the 3 ball. He was doing more. Then, he had to deal with that issue, and it just made more sense for him, to play from 15 feet and in. He became so much better as a free throw shooter, but that guy also, John, block shot at the end of that first Ole Miss game at Colonial Life Arena against that 7'5" dude. That's one of the wildest things I've ever seen in my life. He plays a lot bigger than 6'7" because of his wingspan.
Absolutely. That's the first and only story I've ever written about a single block shot. So yeah. I mean, that definitely left an impression. And you're right. He plays much bigger. And you're right in that he was shooting the ball early on from when we're talking about preseason practice and the trip to the Bahamas and so forth. And yeah, he was. And, but when you're kind of figuring your team out at that point too. So, whether I'm not sure if what he would have done this past season would have looked different if he hadn't gotten the mono or not. Maybe it does. Maybe he is shooting a lot more, but they figured out that they needed him playing this one certain role, kind of regardless. So, but yeah, it's his time now. He played a pretty close to starring role, last year on this team, but he's up for a bigger one here this coming season.
No doubt about it. So going into the weekend, the kind of general consensus was, well, Jameer Brickus is probably going to announce for South Carolina on the visit or shortly thereafter. Nick Pringle, we're probably going to have to wait on. And while I mentioned that, obviously Brickus wound up, you wrote it on the site, it's VIP. He winds up staying home, probably some reasons for that. With Villanova, who else was really a major factor with Nick Pringle outside of Florida State and Steve Smith?
I mean, it was mainly Florida State and Kansas State for Pringle. He fielded a lot of phone calls from a lot of different schools, but it was mainly those two that he was thinking about apart from South Carolina. So, whether he had gone on more trips than those two, I'm not sure, but those were the ones that South Carolina was most worried about and him most focused on.
All right, good stuff. So you touched on Jordan Butler. I like the fact that he's coming home. I think he's a high upside player. Let's go back just a few weeks. Cam Smith, is that right? Or no, Cam Scott. Smith played football. Bear with me, it's been a rough couple of days. Cam Scott, who is the top player in South Carolina, which now means 3 years in a row, Lamont Paris has landed the top high school player from South Carolina, starting with G.G. Jackson, then Murray Boyles, even though he played his senior year at Wabash out in Utah, and they get Cam Scott. He changes his mind from Texas, gets a release, and in short order commits the Gamecocks. John, looking at his film, he's really an elite offensive player, and you see the defensive prowess in the stats with 100 steals. Obviously, transition from high school to college is different. I mean, what kind of player, in your judgment, is South Carolina getting in Cam Scott from Lexington?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think of when I think of Cam Scott is scorer, and a guy who can do that at each level, whether it's taking the ball to the bucket or pulling up from deep. I think scorer when I think Cam Scott. I do think that he's going to have to handle the ball a little bit, especially on next year's team, depending on, what happens with South Carolina's last scholarship spot. They're recruiting they're gonna recruit a guard out of the transfer portal and hopefully with some point guard, acumen to him. But Scott's probably gonna have to handle the ball some, which he can. But you mentioned his steal numbers and whatnot, and that's a little bit different style than what Lamont wants to play. I mean, South Carolina, I didn't look to see exactly where they finished, but it's got to be right at or near the bottom of the SEC, and probably bottom third in the country, bottom 25% in the country in terms of steals. So that's just not the way South Carolina plays defense, or at least not last year. Maybe you see the defense evolve a little bit because of guys with a little bit more length and a little bit more speed, and maybe a little different style, but I don't think so. So we'll see how well he settles into that, because you've got to be a little bit physical to be able to play the style that Lamont wants to do. You got to be very disciplined to be able to play the style that Lamont wants to do. The most upset that I would see Lamont get all season long would be on the defensive end, when a guy would go for a steal and miss. Like Zach Davis did that a lot. Not a lot. He did that more than anybody else. And
Right.
those would be the times that I would see Coach Paris get as frustrated on the sideline as you'd see him get. And it's gonna be a little bit of an adjustment for him on that side of the ball. But I think I think he can be that guy, and I think he can be that good.
No doubt. I mean, look, those steal numbers are by design because they play the pack line defense. They're not going to gamble. They're going to really force you to beat them by either beating multiple people off the dribble or by having to settle for 3-point shots. I mean, they are going to defend the paint with that pack line defense. And so that number certainly by design, and that's the Bo Ryan, Wisconsin roots. And to me, that was from year 1 to year 2, how much South Carolina improved defensively was really one of the big things that stood out to me. And I think he's certainly established his culture now on how important, just like with Dawn Staley's program, how important defense is to being on the floor and staying on the floor.
Absolutely. I mean, I absolutely. And those guys knew that too, and they all played with effort, and all of them played pretty well. I mean, I can't think of a guy whose minutes would probably be higher if they played better defense. Miles Studi would be out there because he would play with effort. He wasn't always playing great defensively, but his minutes would be determined, A, if he was healthy, but B, if he was knocking down shots. So, I don't. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Lamont would tell you differently, but I feel like there wasn't really a guy whose minutes were limited because of their inability or refusal to play defense. So they all bought in pretty well, pretty quickly, and executed, pretty well as well.
No doubt. So South Carolina does have one, at least to me, glaring hole on the roster. That is at point guard. I love the core of guys that are coming back. I love the additions that are coming in. And like you said, Cam Scott, may have to handle the ball. You do have Jacoby Wright and Morris Ugasuk. I like Jacoby Wright coming off the bench and not having to really be on the ball as much. I'm interested to see what kind of a jump Ugasuk can make. But Talon Cooper was able to do so many things. I just don't know how you replace everything he did with one player. I do think Cam Scott certainly helps tremendously with some of that. They kind of have not hit for various reasons. I think they probably canceled the kid's visit from Tulane because they thought they were getting Brickus. He committed to Butler. Brickus goes to Villanova. Pegues from Furman goes to Auburn. And so obviously the portal, I think, closes on Friday. Schools still have 48 hours after that to enter names. So we may not even know until the first part of next week everybody that's in the portal. As of today, Are they still scanning, searching? Are there guys that they could be waiting on to enter the portal that maybe there's not been tampering, but back channel communications initiated by the player? Where does that stand right now, and what's a reasonable expectation for the kind of player they can get at this point?
Yeah, I think today's the last day that those guys can go in, and then schools have 48 hours to get names in. So by, close of business Friday, you should know everybody who's out there and available. But I think you'll know. I think you'll know most guys at least by tomorrow morning. Like, schools try to turn those things around pretty quickly. So, and from what I understand, the staff is going to kind of kick back and wait and see what it looks like, these next day or two, see who all's in there and figure out exactly where they want to go, how they want to handle it. Quez Glover from Kansas State's a guy that they've been looking at, very familiar with since, he was at Samford for a couple of years in the SoCon, and played a couple of years down at Florida as well. And was hurt this past year at Kansas State. So he's had some knee problems, and they're doing some medical stuff or checking on him to, see if they feel good about that or not. And, if they don't, then they're going to see kind of what's out there and exactly how to proceed. So, I don't have a great update right now on exactly what their plan is for this last spot. It's at the point in the process where, I'm not saying teams are full, but there's a lot of teams out there who just don't have, room, and, guys are going in, and, they've got a little bit of time to kind of survey the landscape of what all of their options are, instead of, forcing the issue. And, just because they missed on Brickus over the weekend. So, they thought they had him. He committed, and then he kind of reaffirmed that commitment. And then Villanova swooped in when they lost a guy to Kentucky, and that's just kind of the way it goes. And it happens all the time. VCU thought they had Brickus until South Carolina swooped in. So it happens. But I do know that over the weekend they were kind of ready to celebrate the fact that they had next year's team put together, and they weren't able to do that just yet.
I mean, so I think I read somewhere, probably from you, he has a girlfriend. They have one child, another child on the way. She's in Philly, plus Villanova. They don't have to spend a lot of NIL money on other sports. And basketball is king for them. I mean, I'm sure that had to have played a role, those two factors, when you combine them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do know that he has a girlfriend. I do know that he has one child, and I do know that he has one on the way. Now, who they're with, I don't know. But I do know that all three of those things individually are true. So, but yes, I mean, that certainly has to play a factor. And, you see it all the time. Heck, look at it with South Carolina, these last two portal cycles. A lot of times these kids want to go play, back home near their family when they transfer for their final year, final 2 years. And, I've always been kind of taken aback in the basketball recruiting world, how so often kids are going away from home, and it doesn't matter distance. And, that hasn't really changed over the years. But, when I started doing this job, Will Muschamp used to talk about what a 4 or 5 hour radius of your campus was your recruiting footprint, because kids didn't usually want to go outside of that. That's not really the case for basketball, but I think you see in the portal that a lot of times, and not every time, obviously, but a lot of times people want to kind of get back closer to home. So, but and I do think that proximity to home was certainly a big deal for him. And you add in the family piece of it, and you add in the the NIL piece of it, which I'm sure it may not be what South Carolina offered. I mean, South Carolina potentially could have offered more, but it was competitive enough to keep him up there. And with South Carolina, like, I'm quite confident that Nick Pringle had bigger NIL offers than what South Carolina did. But, sometimes as long as you're competitive, it's enough.
No doubt about it. So everybody stay tuned to thebigspur.com. If you're not already a VIP subscriber, you need to sign up today to get the very latest. Nobody covers the team like John Whittle. So shifting gears to women's basketball transfer. Baseball.
You'll be having a one-sided conversation there, Keith. I'll smile and nod, and I'm not pretty, so me smiling and nodding ain't gonna get you any listeners.
That's all right. I was just it's always good to joke and laugh a little bit. Hey, I do have to say good news for your Jets, Nick Gargiulo going home to New York to play for the Jets. What's your thoughts on that?
Did he get traded? He got drafted by the Broncos, right?
No, that was I thought he got drafted by the Jets.
No, he's going to the Broncos. He's going to the Broncos. Tyree Johnson signed.
I was on the baseball field Friday night until almost 1 a.m. and then back on again at 10 and didn't get home. And I don't even want to get into my travel schedule for this week. It's nuts.
Tyree Johnson did get a free agent invite up to New York. So
maybe that's it. That's the one I'm thinking about.
Yeah. So he'll get up there, get to run around a little bit with a helmet on in camp, and see how that goes. So good for him on that one. But the Jets had the pick after Gargiulo.
That's right. Gargiulo,
Gargiulo went next to last, and the Jets got Mr. Irrelevant, and I can't even remember who it was right now, to be honest with you.
I think that's why I was listening to it coming back, and they kept talking about the Jets. Mike Tannenbaum, who I'm not a big fan of, and I guess neither were the Jets because I think he got fired from there and now's on ESPN. But in the time we got left, I do want to talk about Gamecock baseball. The last 2 weeks, 2 huge series against maybe the best team in the country, Arkansas, even though they had dropped 2 of 3, so they were number 2 coming into that series. And then this past weekend, South Carolina hosted number 4, Kentucky. I thought if this team could just go 3-3 over those 6 games, I thought that would be really good. But you go back to that Friday Arkansas game, and even the Friday Kentucky game was 1-1 going into the 9th inning, and then a bunch of crazy shit happened. But the Arkansas game, 2-1, you really had a chance to get 2 wins against the Razorbacks. You couldn't close the deal. But, then the 9th and 10th inning game, I guess almost a basketball game broke out. Kentucky got 3 in the top of the 9th. The Gamecocks hit 3 solo home runs at the bottom of the 9th to tie it at 4-4. You go to extra innings, Kentucky gets a run. Then Blake Jackson comes back up again after hitting a bomb in the bottom of the 9th and hits a 2-run walk-off. What was that scene like at Founders Park?
If there had been more people there, it would have been pretty darn impressive. It was a long day at the park, but we'll save the crowd conversation for other people. I thought the crowds were good over the weekend, but yeah, in the 10th inning, with it being so late on Friday night, it certainly wasn't packed out, but yeah, the people who were there, it was pretty electric. And, it was a pretty cool scene. Like you see that first home run from Jackson go over the wall on Friday. It's like, okay, well, wish he came up third and a couple of guys had figured out a way to get on, and then he'd really have something. And then Dalton Reeves comes up and you're like, okay, well, he's gotten into a couple and he hits right-handed pitchers much better than left-handed pitchers. So righty out there, he's got a chance. And then he does it. He finds a barrel and that ball flew, and it's like, okay, well, Gavin Casas is up, and if somebody else gets on, that's going to guarantee Ethan Petrie in at bat. And, and then Casas did what he did against a right-handed pitcher that he hadn't hit right-handed pitching all season long. So, when Gavin hit his, it's like, okay, something good's happening for the Gamecocks tonight. Ultimately it did. So, it was a great game that night. I mean, the next day was pretty exciting for a lot of folks. I like the 5-4 games more than the 15-13 games. I like pitching and defense. I've never hidden that at all. So I would much rather see that than 15-13. But you're talking about fine margins. I mean, if Gavin Casas' ball goes about that much further, like that, it's a sweep in South Carolina's favor. That was an incredible play by that center fielder to make that catch on his ball in the bottom of the ninth. That would have been a walk-off bases clearing double that scored 3 runs and giving Carolina a 16-15 win. So, you mentioned that Arkansas series in that Friday night game. Like, man, that dude, Hagen Smith, is just impressive. And South Carolina had opportunities against him, but shoot, it's just guys just hard to hit. And people will talk about Carolina's strikeout numbers and lack of being able to score runs on him and whatnot. But he pitched against South Carolina like he pitched against everybody else. Going into that, he had 10 starts and 7 of them had double-digit strikeouts. He struck out double digits this past weekend against Florida in either 6 or 7 innings. He doesn't give up more than 1 run. His ERA was 1.5. His ERA against South Carolina was 1.5. He walked. South Carolina was able to actually work more walks on him than any other team had this season, had more base runners on base than any other team this season against him. So South Carolina was able to do some things against him that, others weren't, but just weren't able to get that big hit just like others weren't. So, it's just kind of the way it's been for Arkansas. And, they've got some good bullpen too. They led the nation in ERA by think about 0.7 ERA, and that's unheard of to have an ERA total that skewed from 1 to 2. It's impressive what they do on the mound. So, it's just one of those games where you hope you figure out a way to get that one extra hit and drive in those 1 or 2 extra runs. Just didn't that day. It was a really, really good, well-played series. And kudos to Arkansas for being able to come in and win that one. So, but South Carolina turned around and played really well against Kentucky. And like you said, you would have signed for 3-3. I think that's certainly reasonable. You want to win your series at home, but when you play a top 5 team in the country back-to-back weekends, if you can split those, you're probably okay.
No doubt. So Gamecocks up to 15 in the D1 baseball poll, 14 in USA Today, 18 by Baseball America. We know there's 3 SEC series to go. South Carolina, as of now, would be the highest ranked team in those series, but we know that doesn't always mean a whole lot. How are the Gamecocks positioned today? And then what do they need to do at Missouri, at home against Georgia, and at Tennessee to be in that top 16 national seed conversation.
Yeah. I mean, South Carolina is the higher ranked team for each of these next two, and then Tennessee's ahead of South Carolina in that last one. And I do think that if South Carolina wins, two of these three series and doesn't get swept at Tennessee and doesn't do damage to their RPI by losing next Wednesday at Winthrop, go 5-4 these next 9 SEC games and beat Winthrop and you're a host, regardless of what happens in the SEC tournament. South Carolina will be in great shape with a 16-14 record in the league and having a couple of series wins to their credit, a couple of extra series wins to their credit. So, the game tonight against East Tennessee State, I mean, you don't want to lose it, but it's not going to hurt you too much if you do. Their RPI is 54 in the country. They're a good team. South Carolina really hadn't dropped many midweek games, just one. So, the way I always figure they're going to lose at least two, maybe three, and to only lose one so far is certainly been a tip of the cap to those guys for keeping focused in these midweek games. And you want to finish the year strong and certainly can't lose that game next week against Winthrop, because that would be a bad loss and really damage the RPI. But, to host, win two of these next three series, get to 16-14. If you get to 17-13, you're in the conversation for a national seed, depending on what happens in front of you. You're probably not at 17-13, but you're in the conversation. If you make some hay in the SEC tournament, if you get to 18, and your resume for a national seed gets stronger. South Carolina's not out of it. They're going to need a little bit of help. They're going to need to do a job, like potentially beating Tennessee on the road 2 out of 3. But it's not out of the question.
All right, well, John, I can't thank you enough. Appreciate all you do. Appreciate you being a friend of the show and for all your great work on thebigspur.com. Huge stretch coming up for the Gamecocks. And, of course, we're very interested to see if Lamont Paris, can get a guy that comes in to the portal that could really make an impact at point guard. So we'll be definitely following all your work at Big Spur. Again, thanks for being on today. Safe travels with the baseball team. And then I know summer ball is coming, so I know you're going to be a very busy man. And hopefully we'll be able to catch up with you down the road.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Keith. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Take care. All right, that was the dean of Gamecock Baseball, John Whittle from thebigspur.com. So before we bring on Jordan Kaye, if you're listening or watching us live on YouTube today and would like more of this podcast, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to this show every single day, Monday through Friday, except this week, which has been very atypical for me. Great guests like John Whittle, like Jordan Kaye, like Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur, Peyton Titus, Jordan's colleague at Go Gamecocks and the state, the host of that SEC podcast, Michael W. Bratton, and 24/7 Sports National college football analyst Brad Crawford, my good friend Langston Moore, and many, many more. And as a VIP subscriber, you can listen or join us live on either Tuesday or Wednesday nights. It's Wednesday during the high school baseball season. The Garnet and Black Town Hall, which is a live interactive Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show, which is normally an hour, we have an unrecorded overtime, which can last up to 45 minutes. Some of them have gone to an hour, where we bring in a special guest, but that's where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, the Garnet and Black Town Hall, VIP subscribers get our most popular podcast during football season, the morning after, which is released every Sunday during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Join our family by following me on Twitter at Kaye Allsep, or follow the show on Twitter at Gamecock Pod. You can find the link to our Patreon site at the top of the Twitter homepage. If all else fails, just go to the Google machine and punch in Gamecock Pod Daily. It'll take you to our Patreon page. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You'll love it. I guarantee it. Now we go back out to the Nana's Porch guest line and bring in Mr. Augusta National, Jordan Kaye from Go Gamecocks and the State, with a fresh looking Nike Trail t-shirt.
Oh yeah.
There, straightening his cap out for us. At least he doesn't have it on backwards. I'm kind of like Colin Kaye.
Not right now. Really?
So I got to say, I was in San Antonio longer than expected on Monday. So I went to a sports bar. And there's this dude, probably in his 20s, with his girl. He's got his cap turned around backwards inside the restaurant, sitting at the bar. They look like I wanted to say, go get a room. I mean, very disrespectful treating a lady like that in a restaurant. Okay.
Sure.
It just made me thought, if I ever walk into a place and see somebody that looks like that, when my daughter is 18, 19, 21 in a sports bar, I'm going to slap the crap out of that guy off the bar seat with a bottle, a long neck, or something. I'm busting that dude right in the head. So,
just for wearing a backwards hat?
No, well, it was that and the language and the way he was treating the lady in public. But I also don't like a quarterback, like an NFL quarterback. Don't wear your cap on backwards. Be a man. Right. Don't act like a,
That might be the generational shift. I'm like, who cares?
I mean, it probably is. Me and Cowherd are the same age.
Yeah.
We're both 60. So wear the hat like you got it, or when you're inside, take it off. Like I guess I was taught to do when I was growing up. All right, so I want to talk Gamecock football with you, my friend.
Yeah.
And how about, let's start with the draft. Xavier Legette, the Panthers trade up after Kansas City traded up. The Panthers trade up with Buffalo, who needed a wide receiver, but I guess it all worked out. It seemed like all three teams got who they wanted.
Yeah.
Kansas City got Xavier Worthy from here in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Who is he was the fastest guy at the NFL combine.
Yeah.
I mean, he is like a Tyreek Hill type of speed guy. The Panthers wanted Xavier Legette. They traded up, and then Buffalo with the next pick on Friday, they got Keon Coleman. So everybody came out a winner. But just your thoughts on Xavier Legette being that first round pick, and how great was that considering everything that dude has had to overcome during 5 years at South Carolina?
Yeah, I was actually over in Mullins for his draft party. And so I was kind of in the building got to watch everything unfold. And it's weird to go to those draft parties because there is so much waiting. I mean, it is hours and hours and hours. And, you know, it was pretty loose for the first 2 hours, first 20 picks, because I don't think he or anyone in that room thought he was getting picked. But, man, when it starts getting to 24, 25, 26, and the Chiefs move up and they don't draft him, when they said the word Xavier, the Chiefs, everyone went nuts. And it took everyone about 2 minutes to realize that it wasn't Xavier Legette, that they said Xavier Worthy. And then it was like, oh, crap, is he not going to get drafted tonight? Are we going to have to come back tomorrow? And it's weird, too, because it's, I think there were some people who were in the room and friends and family who were hoping he didn't go to the Panthers. First of all, because they're terrible.
Yeah.
And second, because it's man, this will be awesome for us, but, is he going to be able to do everything? When you're that close, there's obligations. You have to, get tickets for people. It's just a little tougher. So they're man, maybe it'll be good. And then once he got picked by the Panthers, everyone was all right, this is kind of awesome. This is so cool. He's going to be 2 hours away. He's still, far enough away like he was at South Carolina, where it's not like he's right down the road. People are going to be right there. But, hey, we can now go see him. We can go watch him play with an easy drive. It's about the same amount of time to Columbia. And so it's just so cool that, a guy like that lost both his parents in high school, kind of redshirted his first year, was stuck deep in the depth chart, didn't really do much, and then kind of just came alive this year, worked himself to be a first-round pick by basically just effort and a scheme that got him the ball. And so it was awesome. And I think his kind of knowing what town he comes from, small place out there with a ton of people who supported him for 20 years, for them to now be able to say, hey, we can drive 2 hours, go watch him play. It's pretty dang cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, it's kind of bittersweet because you are close to home. You do have all that. If Buffalo picks him at 33, that's a culture shock.
Yeah.
Weather-wise, I mean, that's basically like being in Maine. I mean,
Yeah.
one of my former players went to University of Maine, and he left his car parked in the gym parking lot, and they went on a road trip and came back, and he only had a little over a quarter of a tank of gas. His gas tank was frozen. First, he had to dig the car out of about 3 feet of snow.
Yeah.
Then it's not turning over, and he learned very early, you got to keep your tank 3/4 full
Or it'll freeze.
in the wintertime, because if it's less than half a tank, the gas can literally freeze in your gas tank, which I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
But it would have been with a better organization. My dream was the Chiefs, because Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid, even though there is Travis Kelce, who at this point, I'm starting to wonder really how smart Taylor Swift is after, him putting his hands on his head coach in the Super Bowl, and then what he did when he walked across the stage for the college graduation. Again, something I pointed out to my daughter.
Yeah.
But what could Andy Reid have figured out all the ways to use him in that offense? It'll be interesting to see what the Panthers do. They do have Bryce Young, but clearly, at least in the short term, he was not the right quarterback. As I said all along, C.J. Stroud should have been their pick.
Yeah.
But you do have a guy that does have the arm, that does have the cachet of being a number one overall pick, but they are definitely in rebuilding mode.
Yeah, that's the part that stinks. Okay, at least he's familiar with his surroundings, being so close and still in the Carolinas. But, man, you're going to a tough situation in Carolina, where if they win, 4 or 5 games, it's kind of a success. So Yeah, I was kind of with you, being like, hey, I would love to see Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen throwing him the ball. That would be really fun.
Yeah.
So we're not going to get that though.
No doubt. So the other guy I want to talk about, I mean, I am happy for Marcellus Dial, for Nick Gargiulo, for the guys that have signed, undrafted free agent deals or have gotten a training camp invite. But Spencer Rattler, after 6 quarterbacks go in the first round, and 23 out of the 32 players selected in the first round, offensive guys, which was a record, as was 6 quarterbacks in the first round.
Yeah.
I was thinking, man, Spencer Rattler's going on Friday. He's getting picked. Somebody's picking up. He's going in the second round. Worst case, he's going to go off the board early third round. And then, you get the social media guys and them bringing up the QB1 series when he was 17. Really? I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, how can you not get that out of your mind when you look at the college tape? I mean, I've always thought the NFL, they wait way too long after their season to have the draft, and they get caught up in all the minutia and over analyzing these guys and what guys do in shorts versus the film. And I mean, I just think at pick number 150 and with the Saints, I mean, no, Sean Payton's not there, but he is a guy that's kind of in the mold of Drew Brees. And he is a guy that I think can be an NFL player. I mean, just what was, your reaction and just how long he had to wait. I'm sure it had to be really frustrating.
Yeah, I think these front office guys in all sports, and it's more at the top, like ownership and stuff like that, they try and, I don't know, they think they're oracles, prophets, can, like the greatest poker players in the world who can just read tells and know exactly what the cards are. I remember a story, the Suns' old owner, Kawhi Leonard, went in for a visit and he was sweating. And the owner said, he's not made for it. He's sweating. It's just like, what an insane thing to say. But if Kawhi Leonard doesn't work out, that guy's like, told you, I had it. I knew it. And the reality of it's like all these things are 50-50 most of the time. Like, I mean, quarterbacks working out is 50-50, especially in the first round. So, yeah, I mean, as Rattler was dropping, it's tough too because, on the broadcast, you see the little ticker at the bottom of the thing, what teams are coming up.
Yeah.
And you start going through and it's like, man, it's not like there's a whole lot of teams that need a quarterback. When 6 of them draft in the first 12 picks, all of a sudden you're looking around, you're like, okay, maybe the Raiders need a quarterback. Maybe the Giants would take a swing on a quarterback. But other than that, there's 30 other teams where it's like, yeah, they don't really need a quarterback. They don't really need one. And I think for a lot of those teams, they're just like, hey, we have other needs right now. And I think they probably said, hey, we value Rattler similarly to, a Michael Pratt or whoever else, Keaton Slovis or whatever, and said, hey, if we wait, we'll take our chances. The whole QB1 thing, I'm sure there were people who watched that as they were doing the deep dive thing and said, hey, we can't, I don't like the feeling. They're trying to predict the cards. Oh, hey, I don't like that. And not really thinking a whole lot other than that, which is sad because all you had to do was, watch Shane Beam or anything. I will say too, this is what I've learned about just moving across coasts. Fans get very insulated with the thing. And I think when you're at South Carolina, when you're in South Carolina, when you're listening to Rattler talk all the time, you're so insulated and you say, oh, this is Spencer Rattler. This is the guy. This is not the dude who was 17. But all my friends still think of Rattler as the kid from QB1. Everyone I know, because I grew up 10 minutes from Rattler, everyone still thinks of the kid from high school. which sucks. It does. But it's like that's all they remember. And so everyone in South Carolina is saying, well, how could anyone still think about this? How could this happen? It's like, that's just human nature. And it sucks. It really does. But, like, I wasn't surprised to hear it, to be honest.
All right, but like your friends don't get paid millions of dollars to make decisions for NFL organizations.
No, that's
right? Like, that's the difference. Fans, that's okay. You can think whatever you want to think.
Yeah.
These guys are paid and they scrutinize everything. And for that to be a hang up, if that's a legitimate thing, I mean, a good friend of mine's always told me that he worked in college football in the SEC. You'd be surprised at the amount of guys that have double-digit IQs that are, you know, SEC coaches or even NFL coaches or scouts, you know, just because of who they know. I mean, to me, that's really like a below the Forrest Gump IQ line. If that is the deciding factor for you, instead of how many times Spencer Rattler had to hang in the pocket or run for his life or get hit in the mouth and have to deliver a ball on time, but yet he did it time after time after time last year. You know, Dow Loggins brought it up, that dig route against North Carolina where he had to make that throw and he got hit in the mouth as soon as he released the ball. But yet that was one of the more impressive plays. But, I mean, there were so many impressive plays, even though the guy was running for his life because, quite frankly, South Carolina had one of the worst offensive lines in the country, and he still put up big numbers.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's right, but that was the reasoning I could think of. But you would think, too, like, Rattler has been in these draft talks now for basically since the moment he stepped on campus at Oklahoma. There has to have been every NFL scout has had to have probably talked to him at some point. And so the fact that is still a problem after scouts talked to him probably for 2 or 3 years at Oklahoma, and then scouts definitely talked to him these last 2 years at South Carolina, you would think there would be enough people that could kind of bang their head on the table and say, like, what are we doing here? Like, come on. And so I think probably that was probably the rumor that was floating around, and more likely it was, hey, all the early, and the other teams probably felt, hey, we compare him similarly to these other guys, and we're going to wait and get more, different positions right now. So that's my guess.
All right, so I mean, everybody knows that watches this show or is listening knows I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan. The Falcons, they're probably going to get docked some draft picks next year for tampering with Kirk Cousins. They signed him to a 4-year, $180 million deal.
Yeah.
Some people say $90 million guaranteed. Some people say $100 million. All of it's in the first 2 years. That's the first shocker of the first round.
Yeah.
Them taking Michael Penix Jr. And look, I love Michael Penix. Like, honestly, if I had a vote for the Heisman, I would have voted for him because guess what? He did the same stuff Jalen Daniels did, and his team was undefeated.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they were in the national championship game. They beat Oregon twice. You know, they beat Alabama.
Yeah.
So, and then to me, the reach of the first round is really Bo Nix going number 12.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, the Pac-12, not the best defensive league, but there are teams like Oregon and Utah that played great defense, even Oregon State in that league. I thought J.J. McCarthy went too high for me. I mean, he's definitely a developmental guy. I mean, honestly, I don't hate the pick for the Falcons because
I'm with you.
After Matt Ryan, they wasted away in the like Moses in the wandering around the desert for 40 years. And it seemed like 40 years after they blew that 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But Kirk Cousins is a short-term solution, and he's coming off an Achilles injury. And I don't care if he got pissed off or not. He's under contract, and he probably is going to be the guy. But just your thoughts on the Michael Penix Jr. pick at number 8.
I didn't mind it a whole lot. I think you look at a lot of these teams around the NFL, like literally have no chance of winning. Teams like the Steelers, trying to think like the Titans. There are so many of these teams that are the Buccaneers aren't winning a Super Bowl. Like there are so many of these teams that just get stuck because they lose a great quarterback. And then it's just like, well, we can't really tear it down. We don't have a good enough draft pick to get a great guy. We haven't really nailed down a free agent. Like, it's just hard sometimes. And I think the Falcons were just like, hey, we've got all these good young pieces. We've got to, like, prepare for the future at some point. And I think, Michael Penix is probably okay saying, hey, I'll sit behind Kirk Cousins for a year or two. And if you have to pay Kirk Cousins for an extra 2 years or whatever while he's the backup, like, NFL teams spend money on much dumber things. So I was totally fine with it. Everyone's, Michael Penix or Kirk Cousins got all this guaranteed. Like, remember when the Seahawks signed Matt Flynn to some crazy deal and then he never even started a game because Russell Wilson came in? It's like the Cardinals paid like Cliff Kingsbury like a 5-year deal and then just fired him after 1 year. Like, NFL teams spend their money on the dumbest things. If you want to take a risk with a quarterback who you really think that highly of, and who's probably going to be around for like 10 years, like, fine. Like, that's okay with me. I totally thought it was okay. I think it was defensible. Could you have traded back 2 or 3 picks and probably got him? Yeah. But I was okay with it. And, I think what you're saying too, it's like, hey, these last 2 years have been just absolute hell as a Falcons fan. So if we can do anything to make sure that doesn't happen, in the 2020s, I'll be okay. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page, it sounds like, with that.
And plus, you get him on a rookie contract for 5 years. And so if he pans out, great, right? Like you got a guy for at least 3 years as a starter that you're not going to have to spend a bunch of cap money on. If Cousins is only 2 years and then you move on from him. But if it doesn't work out, he's still your backup and you've got a backup at a low price for 5 years. So to me, I didn't really
mean, the Packers did the same thing with Jordan Love. It's like, hey, I think there's a lot of benefit to guys just sitting for a year or two. Patrick Mahomes sat for a year, turned out to be okay. Like, So the idea that you can spend a high pick and not have the guy play right away, like, that should be the norm. And it's not.
Aaron Rodgers sat behind
the same
Brett
thing
Favre
for years. It's okay. It ends up working out. So, I think you
talk about an epic draft night drop. That's probably the most epic draft night drop of all times.
Yeah.
Of course, he certainly proven he should have been a top 5 pick, but he's really evolved into a really weird dude. So
yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the Gamecocks. So we had the spring game. We talked to you prior to the spring game, kind of previewed it. So let's just start off your general impressions after seeing the team, how they look just on the eyeball test.
Yeah, I thought the defense looked fantastic. I think the front seven has so much depth, so much length, so much versatility that they can really do the rotation. They call it the flex nickel, which basically that just means there's going to be 5 DBs at all times, and then you can switch up whether it's a 3-3-5 or a 4-2-5. And that's kind of a thing that no one does, which usually when you try and do things that no one does, it rarely works out. But like South Carolina actually has the length and the guys like Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard or Gilbert Edmond and Van Martin Scott, who are so big and so fast that they can transition between playing like outside linebacker and defensive end, and they can do it pretty seamlessly. And so it really doesn't matter what scheme you're playing. And that's the thing that I find like so interesting is like those guys were such menaces during the spring game. Like it has to get you excited as a South Carolina fan to be like, holy crap, like these guys are just going to be all over the ball all the time. And if one of them isn't playing well, there's three of them behind him. So that was the number one thing of like, okay, this flex nickel thing could actually work. And the second was like, sometimes I wasn't the guy who said, hey, Lenora Sellers is 100% the quarterback. Because it was like, we've literally seen him make like two plays. He had the 50-yard throw against like Furman or something. And then like a big run against Vanderbilt. It's like, that was what we were anointing him a star because he had two garbage time touchdowns. But then to see him in this spring game run an offense with just confidence, poise, and the thing I thought was so impressive was he made the smart play like every single time. He didn't throw into double coverage. He didn't try and air out a ball. He just took the easy play. He just took the singles. He took single, and just never tried to go for the home run. And I was like, perfect. That is exactly what you want. The ball was coming out of his hand extremely quickly. The guys like Dylan Stewart were getting by their man in 2 seconds, but the ball was already out, so they couldn't even touch him. And I thought it was so impressive to see a dude like that who's young, who hasn't started a college football game, to just constantly make the right plays. So those were the two things where you come out of it and you're like, wow, like, all right, this gives me some hope, some optimism that South Carolina is going to, be good in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I think the coaching staff, I mentioned this on the regular podcast a few times. I think, Dow Loggins was at Arkansas for 2 years with KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders, right?
Yeah.
And Rocket Sanders, he didn't need to play. When I was a teenager and George Rogers was a senior, he had on a pair of sweatpants and his jersey the whole spring practice and the spring game, standing on the sidelines next to the head coach. Because you know what you got in him. Your job's to get him to the first game healthy because that's your stud, right? Like, Loggins, if they thought, and obviously it's better to see it over the course of 5 weeks of spring and when the lights come on.
Yeah.
I think they were confident in Lenora Sellers. He is a really sharp young man. He's, was a brilliant, an honor student, like over a 5.0 GPA. He was, did lead his team to a state championship. He was dynamic. And he is still a freshman, but, it's kind of like Dow Loggins said on that Thursday one, it was going to be like a bowl of vanilla ice cream, right?
Yes.
And, you weren't going to see a whole lot. But the players know. And I think after the game, we all know they don't have to name him as the starter. To me, he's clearly the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
The offensive MVP of the spring. I mean, I think South Carolina potentially has somebody special in him. I felt the same about the defense. I mean, wow, Dylan Stewart. You see all the tools, right? Like
that dude can play. Holy crap.
Yeah, Charlie Strong ran a 3-3-5 defense. One of those outside linebackers was a guy named Kalimba Edwards who played in the NFL, and he was 6'5" or 6'6", 260 pounds, and he could stand up, stacked as a linebacker. He could walk it up on the edge and shift the line, or he could play with his hand in the dirt.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think with Dylan Stewart, with Kyle Kennard, with Gilbert Edmond, and even Van Martin Scott, I think South Carolina they have the flexibility with those guys to be able to do the same thing.
Yeah. That's the thing that I think is like so impressive is they have depth now where we can rotate these guys every couple plays and no one should be tired. And when you have that going into a year, you can withstand injuries, you can withstand, hot days in the SEC. You're going to be much better set up. And so that was a delight to see.
No doubt. So outside of those front guys, which I really love, Demetrius Knight and Bengali Kamara, I mean, I know they're not saying it, and Debo Williams probably will be a starter, but with those guys as well as the freshman linebackers, to me, I can't count on Mokaba. I don't think Shane Beamer even knows for certain if he's playing next season. I think they got to get through the summer and then see where he is physically and emotionally and mentally, right? But they are a lot better. To me, I thought I like Judge Collier, but Bakari Swain really jumped off the 70-inch big screen here in my office / man cave. It's easy to see why Torian Gray wanted a guy that Deion Sanders was kind of recruiting to be that same role as him, to be a wide receiver and a corner. I still think he's probably the most natural wide receiver on there that's on the team right now.
Yeah.
We'll get to the 2 transfer portal guys in a minute. But you see the ball skills, the speed, the quickness, the explosiveness.
Yeah.
I think he's going to help South Carolina immensely on special teams, and I really feel a lot better about that other cornerback position, whether it's him or Judge Collier.
Yeah. Bakari Swain did so much for himself on Saturday, if not just for his own standing within the locker room, within the coaching staff, but just with the fan base too, of like, holy cow, like this guy converted wide receiver basically, kind of came in last year and like didn't do a whole lot that would impress you, and comes out in the spring game and is just a monster, just fantastic with his feet all over the receivers, makes a heck of an interception. And you're thinking, okay, he's probably right now the favorite to be opposite O.D. Fortune at that starting corner spot. And then you've got, Judge Collier. You got like Joe Lewis Solomon, the freshman who's coming in this summer. You got guys behind them. But Bakari Swain did a ton for himself. If that's the dude who's starting week 1, I think you're feeling pretty good.
I mean, no doubt about it. O'Donnell Fortune, I'm still not crazy about him. I don't think he's an NFL guy. Maybe he surprises me. Jalewis Solomon is coming in. The transfer portal is open. I don't know if Cormani McClain, who just happens to be from Lakeland, Florida. Oh, by the way, Torian Gray's from there. I don't know if they'll go down that road or not.
Yeah.
But I certainly feel better about that position group after watching the spring game and just seeing the good young players. And I know how high this coaching staff is on Jalewis Solomon.
Yeah.
And he's going to play. I mean, barring an injury, he is going to play. You got Jalen Kilgore at nickel, David Spalding. If he could be healthy, he could be a nickel, he could be a corner. And then you've got DQ Smith and Nick Emanwari, and behind them you got Gerald Kilgore and Peyton Williams, who's coming off a red shirt injury, who they like so much that Keenan Nelson Jr. went in the transfer portal because he's just not going to be a factor.
Yeah. Those are those healthy transfers that makes you feel better about your football team, where you're like, if that guy's transferring, that means the coaching staff feels really good about everyone else.
So let's talk about the offensive line. I think this coaching staff, well, I mean, I know from talking to a great source, they feel like they have two starting caliber left tackles in Tree Babalade and Josiah Thompson. Thompson, I mean, you can just see it. I mean, the athletic ability, the stance, the kick, the ability to move laterally. He just looks like that guy that can do it as a freshman. Your thoughts on Josiah Thompson, because to me, wow.
Yeah, so I saw him at the Shrine Bowl or something a couple months ago, and I had never seen him before, and I was just like, my first impression was like, this kid is massive, but he's like super skinny, and the Shrine Bowl was weird. It just like, I don't know, the scrimmages stuff doesn't help offensive linemen, so I was like, oh, I don't know. I saw him at the gala the other night. He told me he put on, I think, 25 or 30 pounds already. And he said he's trying to put on another 20 pounds, again. He said he eats 8 meals a day, is eating like just a crazy amount of eggs and steak and whatever else. He is like turning himself into South Carolina starting left tackle. I know Tree played, maybe is there a chance that Tree could be the right tackle? I think that's a possibility. Right now, if I had to guess, I think Josiah Thompson has done so much to impress the coaching staff that he's probably the favorite right now. And if he's not, I feel like he's going to work himself in. There's always going to be injuries on the offensive line. I think Josiah Thompson is going to find himself on the field. And Tree probably will too. I think those two, if those are your starting tackles moving forward, it doesn't get much better than that, especially if those dudes stay 4 years.
I agree. I know one concern they had last year with Tree and looking towards this year with Josiah is for a true freshman to have to play as many reps during the course of a season as a freshman. That's different. Thompson came in early. Babalade didn't come in till the summer. Neither, did Trevon Ball. Those were the two guys that played. They kind of wore down, the staff felt like. And, Case and Henry, they didn't have to roll him out in bubble wrap. It looks like, now he is healthy. I liked him. And so some other guys on the offensive line that kind of caught my eye, Kamar Bell, and a guy that surprised me, Aaron Park. I thought he acquitted himself very well and looks the part of maybe a second team right tackle there behind Case and Henry.
I thought the Torricelli Simpkins.
Well, that was going to be the next guy, Simpkins. We didn't get to see Marquis Anderson, but after watching Torricelli Simpkins, to me, that dude's going to be tough to keep off the field.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the biggest guy in terms of height, but holy cow, I mean, he was one of those dudes when I was watching the edge guys, the Dylan Stewarts, the Kyle Kennard. I mean, Simpkins held his own, which is, I think a lot of people weren't really sure what to make because he wasn't the big-time transfer. He didn't come from Oklahoma like Parks did. He came from little NC Central, I think it was. So you weren't sure, but man, he stood out in every single spring practice I watched. He stood out in the spring game. And every time anyone talks about him, they're like, holy cow, Torricelli's going to play. And he's done a lot for himself by coming in early and really showing everyone, okay, doesn't matter. I came from NC Central. I'm gonna play. And I thought he was one of the more impressive offensive linemen they have right now.
I agree, and I thought Kamar Bell, he played both guard and center. He looks like a guy that could be one of those swing guys in 6, 7, and 8 rotation. Yeah. Obviously, we didn't get to see Marquis Anderson, who I know they're very high on. Yeah. We also didn't get to see, some of the other guys that are injured. But the guys we did see, I mean, certainly, Rashawn Lee at center, Travon Ball, Kason Henry, Park, Simpkins, Babalade, and Josiah Thompson, all those guys look the part.
Yeah.
Just got to, get the pieces on the chessboard in the right order, and continuity so important with those 5 guys. You got to get past the cross training. You got to lock guys in every summer rep, every walkthrough, every fall practice. To me, maybe you're figuring out 6, 7, and 8 or one position. Like, is it going to be Thompson or Tree, etc. But continuity is so important on the offensive line.
Yeah, and whatever the starting offensive line is, you have to be able to accept that that's going to change plenty because of injuries. And so it's, hey, do the other guys fit in too? Have they practiced with everyone? Are they rotating around guys? Are they doing that in the fall? Does Simpkins know how to play, 2 or 3 positions? Does this guy know how to play left and right tackle? So those are all the things I'm kind of looking at too, of like, okay, how much are they rotating it? Because whatever the first offensive line they throw out, it's going to change. It's going to change because injuries kill that position all the time. And you've got young guys who aren't used to playing, 12 SEC games.
All right, so since the spring game, the wide receiver room has certainly changed in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
It was 2 for Tuesday or 2 for 1 Tuesday.
Yeah.
If you're at a gentleman's club.
Yeah.
But before we talk about the most recent additions, who are the wide receivers that jumped out to you?
This sounds terrible, but like very few of them did. I didn't think it was a very impressive group at the spring game. I will say Mazio Bennett and DeBron Gatling, the 2 4-star freshmen, have received incredible praise from the coaches. And I thought Mazio had a really nice catch in the spring game. And you're like, okay, that's impressive. Every time you see him in practice, they seem to hold their own. Gage Larvadane, the Miami, Ohio transfer, another guy, anytime anyone asks about wide receivers, his name gets brought up. Really good deep ball threat. It showed that a couple times during spring practice. But aside from that, man, it's not like they did a whole lot for me. It's tough when Nick Harbor's not out there because he's going to take a lot of attention. But in the spring game, there wasn't a whole lot that said, oh my gosh, that guy surprised me. So they needed to hit the portal. They did. We'll see how much of an impact it makes.
I agree. I think part of that could have been by design. Everything was a bowl of vanilla ice cream. Everything was a single. But I'm with you.
Possible.
I mean, I thought Mazio, he popped a little bit. DeBron Gatling, a very highly recruited guy. I mean, and honestly, I think he probably still has a high ceiling, but I think he may have the highest floor because he played at a great high school program, played in the state championship. They won the state championship game. He had been committed to Texas A&M. Every school in the SEC he had visited, he had offers from. I mean, Alabama, LSU, Auburn, going down to Miami, all over the place. I like him. I like Mazio Bennett. And then we'll see on the other guys. We've all heard the same on Gage Larvadane. You hear, Jared Brown's name. But I really think they helped themselves and got better yesterday.
Yeah.
It started with Vandrevius Jacobs, who went to the same high school as Gilbert Edmond, and then they were teammates last year at FSU. FSU had the veteran receiving core, portal guys. He's played in 4 games in the regular season, played in the bowl game after all the, 97 opt-outs.
Yeah.
And 3 catches for 60 yards, but he was the Palm Beach Player of the Year. And let's face it, that is a talent-rich area. He was a 4-star guy, 100 receptions as a senior. 149 catches, 2,320 yards, and 31 touchdowns at a high level in South Florida. I think you have to like him. He's not the biggest guy, 6 foot, 175, but he's still a hell of a lot bigger than Gage Larvadane and some of those other dudes.
Sure. I think he's a complete unknown. Sure, he was a really good high school player, but clearly he wasn't going to play at Florida State this year, or he probably wouldn't have transferred. And you don't know. So that's a guy who's going to come in. He's going to be asked to learn the entire playbook during fall and then somehow play. The good thing is you get him with 4 years of eligibility left. You're thinking, okay, we liked his high school tape. We would have taken him out of high school. And now we've got plenty of time to develop him. It's like we just got him out of high school. So in that, you're liking him, but man, he hasn't done anything in college. He wasn't going to play at Florida State. I think he's an unknown right now, and you kind of say, we'll trust the evaluation.
All right, so then last night, Dlaevon Campbell, 6'4", 218 from Missouri City, Texas. That's the Houston area. He didn't really do anything at Illinois, transferred to Nevada. He had 2 excellent seasons out there. For them, he is 6'4", he is 218, he can run. He's made explosive plays. They desperately had to have a guy like him. They got one. He's got 1 year.
Yeah.
And so either he will or he won't, but
yeah, I
he's
liked
at
him.
least done it.
Yeah, I liked him a lot better. I will say, for him to put up those stats, they don't look great, but Nevada was literally atrocious. One of the worst teams in all of college football. They were terrible. Their coach got fired. They never had a chance in any of these games. I had to watch him a couple times. It was miserable. So, for him to even have a couple of those games, you look at his stats, he is a big-bodied guy who can go up and catch jump balls, but basically he was always matched up against the best corner on whatever Mountain West team he played, and there were some really good ones. He had the biggest assignment. It was tough. I think he's a guy who can come in here and have 500-600 yards, have 40 catches. Big body, knows how to run routes, very experienced, has learned, and he's had 3. This will be his 4th head coach. He's never played on a team that's had a winning season in college. 5 years, 5 losing seasons. The guy probably desperately wants to win, desperately wants to go to a bowl game, win a bowl game. He's someone where you've got to be and say, we know he's going to come in and give everything he's got to try and prove himself. He has the frame you want to match up outside of Nick Harbor. So I think the potential for him to just kind of come in and have a really productive year is high.
You look at it, he averaged 19.2 yards per catch. He was the leading wide receiver in the Mountain West Conference. Yards per catch. And like you said, he's always matched up with the number 1 corner.
There were probably about,
to me, that's kind of encouraging.
Yeah, there were probably about 2 or 3 or 4 other Mountain West receivers who South Carolina could have gone after and gotten in the previous portal, and for whatever reason didn't. But no, for you to get this guy in the spring, I think is a good get.
Good stuff. So I know it's a way early forecast, but first, Nick Harbor. I didn't think he had a great shot at being an Olympian back in January, but I think the odds are increasing. He's an Olympian.
I don't know about that. Like, I think he'll get invited to the Olympic trials, and that'll be awesome. I don't think he's going to be an Olympian based upon his times. He's going to be in the mix. He'll go to the Olympic trials, but I mean, there's a guy on his team who's ran a faster time. Like, there's some of the best sprinters in the world. Like, that's just really, really hard. I don't think he's probably going to be on the Olympic team. Like, that is almost unheard of. I know Devin Allen did it in, I think, 2016 as a hurdler. But like, you have to be top 3 in the country. And like, I don't know if he's top 3 in the NCAAs right now. So it's tough. I mean, that's a pretty bold thing to say. If he was a senior right now and had been running track for 4 years, I'd be like, okay, maybe there's a chance. But I don't know about the Olympics.
So if he does not get through the Olympic trials, which I think will be in June, then he's coming back and he's going to be full-time football.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe they still need him. I mean, I don't know if they're going to need him at tight end. I'm very high on my man from Sumter, Joshua Simon. I like what I saw from Brady Hunt. And you could tell from Sean Elliott's interview, Michael Smith is a special kind of guy. Is he a wide receiver or?
I think he's a wide receiver. I mean, if you look at him now, too, he's listed at like 242, but I've talked to him since then, and he's like, I've slimmed down so much because of track, and I feel so much better. I'm going to keep this body for football. So I think you're going to see him play probably closer to 220, 225, which maybe hurts him a little bit in the blocking game, but definitely transitions incredibly well as a wide receiver. Think about Nick Harper even faster than he already was. That's dangerous. And it's not like he's skinny. He's still going to be 225 pounds. But he's just dropped from, I think, like, you know, that freshman weight where they got him in. They're like, bulk up. And now he's like, awesome. So I feel a little bit better at a little lower weight. And so you're going to see him at, you know, a little slimmer than you did last year, which is only going to make him better on the football field. But yes, I think he's a wide receiver.
I mean, I got to be honest. I was on the sideline for the pregame for Kentucky.
Yeah.
We were down in the end zone when they were warming up down there. I had to move because that dude was the most intimidating player on the field. I mean, he looked like Predator.
Yeah.
With that helmet on, he was just huge.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I didn't want to take any chance of that guy bumping into me because they would have had to take me to the hospital probably.
Yeah.
Concussion.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think he's somewhat of an unknown at wide receiver. I do.
Sure.
You know, the best thing you can say about Justin Stepp is he developed Jalen Brooks. He developed Josh Vann. He developed Xavier Legette. He didn't, you know, get the opportunity to coach Nick Harbor, but Mike Furry being an NFL guy, I really feel good about at least the development of the guys that they have. He's gone out. He seems to be recruiting at a high level because of his energy and passion, his NFL, background, his story. But that wide receiver room is still a big question mark to me.
Yeah. I think the positive is you do have a guy like Furry who is similar in build to a lot of these dudes he's coaching, and he made it as an NFL guy, which tells me, okay, not only can he relate to them as saying, hey, I came from being a small school kid, made the NFL, but he's like, I can tell you exactly what you need to do to make the NFL, but I looked exactly like you. And so that's going to help these guys just be incredibly efficient. He understands their route running. He understands what a guy at their size, the size of Amari Huggins, Bruce, or Gates Larvadane, or Jared Brown. He knows exactly what they need to do to be successful. And that's probably where he's going to help the most, I would think.
No doubt. So, I mean, we didn't really see Alex Herrera. He had the injury. Kai Kroger, though, he seems to be poised for a big year. You know, with Joe DiCamillo's special teams, it's going to be integral.
Yeah, no, that's going to
help.
help.
It was, you know, I really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the special teams drills or any of that stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
Because, again, you just weren't going to learn a whole lot. But now, outside of, you know, the four guys that are coming in, 3 freshmen and a JUCO defensive tackle, I think we know what the roster is going to look like. What are how do you handicap South Carolina of getting to a bowl game this year?
I'll put it at 60-40. I think they do have a good roster. I think their running game is going to be much improved. I really like their defense. And if Sellers is the guy that he showed he was during the spring game, you're feeling really good. The other thing is, like, if they played Old Dominion instead of North Carolina last year, they're in a bowl game. And they don't have that North Carolina on the schedule. Their non-conference is much easier. They have 3 cupcake games. So then all you're doing is saying, you got to win 3 SEC games, just 3. Okay, well, you got Vanderbilt. There's 1. All right, you just got to win 2 SEC games. You could probably beat Kentucky. You could probably beat A&M. Then you're looking around, okay, can you steal another one? But even if you just beat Kentucky and A&M, you're in. So that's how I look at it. Saying,
Vanderbilt.
all right, well, I consider Vanderbilt that's basically you got to win 2 real SEC games. You can beat Kentucky and you can beat A&M. Then you got to just steal. That's already a bowl game. So then you can steal another one, I'm sure. That's how I look.
Look, I know LSU's going to be LSU. Certainly Alabama's going to be Alabama. Oklahoma's on the road. So is Alabama. But all those teams definitely downgraded at the quarterback. Well, not Alabama because their guy's back. But Oklahoma and LSU, I mean, they've clearly downgraded at quarterback.
Yeah.
LSU's had huge turnover. They fired the entire defensive staff. Of course, that could be a good thing.
Yeah. And those games are at home.
Right.
Or the LSU game is.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is going to be tough, but it's year 4. And coming off of year 3, you know, Juice Wells, injury, Spencer Rattler, he's gone. Xavier Leggette's gone. But defense and running game and special teams, generally you can those travel. Offense is going to be better at home.
Yeah.
I do think, you know, for Clayton White's sake, they better play good defense this year. I thought he was on the hot seat last year. I think he's on a much hotter seat this year, but he does have clearly a more talented roster, especially on the deeper on the defensive line. I mean, we didn't talk about DeAndre Jules, who he's a grown-ass man. So is Goodwine from Alabama. I mean, they you know, with T.J. Sanders, Boogie Huntley, Tonka Hemingway. Simmons coming in. I mean, they have Nick Barrett. They have guys on the interior, that defensive front, that have played a lot of football.
Yeah, that's just all goes to the depth on the front 7. I mean, they're going to have dudes. They're going to have depth. They're going to have a rotation. And it's going to give them so much more of an ability, give Clayton White the chance to call whatever he wants and know that he's got the dudes to make it happen.
No doubt about it. Hey, Jordan, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. Tell us what's coming up on Go Gamecocks and the state sports page.
Yeah, I can shift over to baseball a little bit more. Gonna be at the game today at East Tennessee State. They're playing 6:30 p.m. Kind of will have a recap from the Mizzou series, and then just some little football stuff, of course, sprinkled in. I've talked to a couple of guys, held some stuff from spring ball, talked to some guys at the gala, and we'll have those stories sporadically popping up on Go Gamecocks.
All right, Jordan, great stuff. I can't thank you enough. Appreciate you joining in today, and we'll definitely look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you. All right, that is Jordan Kaye. Man, what a great guest. He's always bringing it in hot. All right, so switching to women's basketball, there was a huge deal made on the internet last week, and I said it. I thought, maybe there are 2 or 3 transfer portal players Dawn Staley could be interested in, but the only one that was probably a no-brainer was Kiki Iriafen. Honorable mention All-America because she was playing alongside Cameron Brink, but I thought she was Stanford's best player. So it came out she was visiting Southern Cal and South Carolina. Well, that South Carolina visit is not taking place because she committed to Southern Cal, as did Olenhoffen, the guard from Oregon State. But fams, that just goes to show you may be smart enough to graduate from Stanford in 3 years, but that doesn't mean you have a whole lot of common sense or you're that smart when it comes to making a decision, because Juju Watkins is going to shoot it 30 times a game. Okay, that's a fact. Yeah, it's close to home. Maybe that was a factor, but if you want to win a national championship, South Carolina was the best bet, but she's off the board. Honestly, I hope South Carolina's playing Southern Cal to open the season in Las Vegas. That would be ideal to me. But it was reported yesterday, and I don't know what's going on with Mike Neighbors at Arkansas, but I mean, people are they're literally leaving Arkansas like a hurricane is getting ready to roll through, like Hurricane Katrina, or really the one that came after that in Texas. Because I was in Texas at a national meeting, and we were trying to get out of Texas on a plane, and people were getting out of there. They didn't have enough people to open the airport in Houston. So at any rate, Miriam Dauda, 6'4", out of Bentonville, Arkansas, who was on the all-SEC team, one of the better players in the country, a McDonald's All-American, a Jordan Brand Classic player, Naismith National High School Player of the Year semifinalist. She went to Arkansas, and her freshman year, she was injured as a true freshman. She out of high school, she was the number 13 player and the top post player in the country as a redshirt freshman, second in offensive rebounds, fourth in blocks. But this past season, she really blossomed, started all 33 games, led the SEC in field goal percentage. She at 45%, or she led her team. She led her team in blocks with 74. She had 79 offensive rebounds. She broke a 37-year school record for blocks in a single game. She blocked 10 shots in a game, an SEC game, in Alabama, which was second most by any player in the NCAA. She had 17 double-digit scoring games, 5 double-digit rebound games, 3 double-doubles. She's really impressive. It was reported she's considering South Carolina, UConn, and Stanford. And I'm telling you what, I mean, she had 19 points against the Gamecocks and had a season-high 22 points on 9 of 16 from the floor with 9 rebounds against Tulsa in the BIT tournament. I think she would be a great addition, but if South Carolina stands pat, they're still the favorites to win the national championship. And I can't wait to see who they're going to play in Las Vegas. I hope it is Southern Cal or UCLA, or I don't know. If they're not going to play Stanford, which I think they are scheduled to do, although with Tara Vandrevius stepping down, that contract may not be signed. Maybe Stanford's new coach doesn't want to play South Carolina twice. Maybe they get them, but you really hope it's one of the top teams in the country that's not going to be on your schedule, like UConn, like Texas, like Oklahoma, right? You're going to play NC State. You're probably going to play North Carolina again somewhere. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they're going to duck you. You know you're going to get LSU. You may get them twice next year. Or maybe you get Texas twice, since those games will be probably Sunday afternoon ABC or Monday night ESPN games. But I got to say, Miriam Dodd, a very intriguing player that I'd probably take because she's got 2 years of eligibility, and you just have a monster front court. Does it create a little bit of a log jam? Yes, it does. But you know what? It's your time right now. You're trying to win, and that certainly takes a little bit of pressure off of your freshmen to not have to, be major parts of the rotation, even though, like, to me, Joyce Edwards and Chloe Kitts, either they could play together or they could play on the wing. One could be a 3, one could be a 4, but to me, Dada is more of a 5, like I think Ashlyn Swatkins. And that'd be very formidable along with Adele Tack. I mean, it probably wouldn't be the best of news for Sakina Walker, but I'm probably taking her if she's a culture fit. To me, that's probably going to be the deciding factor. Is she a culture fit? Because as we all know, Dawn Staley is not going to do anything to upset the culture of her program. All right, certainly appreciate everybody that joined us today live on YouTube. This is getting ready to go up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. So until tomorrow, this is Keith Alsep saying God bless, go Gamecocks, and thanks for watching or listening wherever you are. Garnet and Black Town Hall coming up tonight. Until then, I am out of here.